We have a face that I'm sure many people are familiar with in Brent from Talk Commerce and Vijay, who's a solution architect at Evrig. These guys are truly Magento Masters, and I'm excited to hear what they got to say. Come on up, guys.
All right, my name is Brent Peterson. I'm the president of Wagento. We're a Magento solution partner. And this is Vijay Golani. Vijay?
Myself, Vijay Golani, and I'm at Evrig, and I'm from the events committee at Magento Association, and as Brent said, Magento Master.
And I forgot that I'm also on the committee for membership, so $1 a month. And our whole talk is just gonna be, it's an NPR commercial, so we want you to join the Magento Association.
Yeah, just $1.
And there's our contact stuff. All right, so we've put on Meet Magento India. We had the biggest selfie in the world for Magento events, and I think we should do a selfie right now with everybody. So we're gonna try to get everybody in the picture. So everybody's gonna have to stand up because we want to make this look like there is lots of people in the room. Obviously, yeah. This is the best talk we've had. All right. Good. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So today we're going to talk about performance and why performance matters. We all think it should matter, but we're going to try to go through some of the main steps, and a lot of you probably already know this, but we're going to go through some of the steps that are involved in making your site perform well. So the first thing that's here is Google has started algorithms that are ranking you by speed, and they're breaking it down to a few steps. So cumulative layout shift is their visibility part of it. And the visibility part of it means as soon as that page loads, it doesn't want anything moving around. So example, you want to hit the button and all of a sudden something moves, and instead of buying a $10 pair of something, you've bought a $1,000 something, right? So cumulative layout shift is that first one that Google is looking at that we're going to cover, or they want you to cover and make it better.
Second one is the largest contentful page. So once you enter the URL in the browser, and until the content will be not loaded in your viewport, not the full page, but the viewport, either if you are visiting a mobile or from the desktop. So that time, how much it should take, and as it says that less than 2.5 seconds should be a good for that. If it is going above that, then maybe a problematic for your core web vitals.
The next one is first input delay, and again, we're just trying to give you some background on why the performance is important, and we're also we're going to lay out how things are going to have to change a little bit on your front end of Magento to make this. So your first input delay is simply when is the first time you can click on something, and that's obviously very important. So the longer you wait, the more people are going to leave your site. First input to play should be less than 100 milliseconds.
Yeah.
You're going to do this one, Vijay?
Sure. Yeah. So there are multiple tools available to check your core web vitals and the performance. First one is directly in the Google Chrome browser, where you can click on the Lighthouse tab and you can create a report for that. Second one is a Google Page Speed tools. Over there also you can verify your performance in the desktop and mobile. Apart from that, there are other available like a GTmetrix, web page test. Over there, you can find a drop down. So sometimes if you are trying to check a Google Lighthouse score, but you maybe see a performance report. So make sure that you select that which devices you wanted to test. Even you can select the internet speed also, like 3G speed or other speed, and based on that you can measure the performance. So there are multiple tools available. We are not going to be in detail, but this is going to be helpful too.
And who's already using all these tools or some of them to measure their site speed? So this should be totally up for everybody. And I would now also, since if you use T-Mobile and you travel in Europe, they restrict you to 2G. So try using Google Maps in Europe on 2G. It's almost impossible now. All right, so this is just a big overview of the performance areas that we're going to cover. So front end is completely obvious. We're going to talk a little bit about the middleware part of it and how maybe not having an endpoint available is going to slow your site down. We're going to just touch on tracking pixels, and then we're going to touch on the back end. And then if we have some time, we can talk about how even the database time is going to slow your site down. So these are the main areas that we're going to cover today. And we won't have a lot of time to go into detail, and we'll be available after for questions. So to start out on the back end, if you're not caching your site, again, this should be obvious to everybody, but if you're not caching your site, your site's going to be slow. Time to first byte is a good way to find an indication of how fast your site is coming back. Because if your site isn't cached, you're going to go back to the server. It's going to have to do some processing, and then it's going to come back to you. So cache is literally cash in the bank. Keep calm and clear your cache.
So there are tools available. So we are now focusing on the backend side. So if you wanted to measure the performance from the backend perspective, then there are multiple tools available. And first one is a New Relic. So that is called application performance monitoring tool, where you do not require to inject any code in your e-commerce websites. Everything you can directly measure in the New Relic. Over there, you can check that how many CPU usage time, like how much percentage CPU it is getting used, which URL are calling multiple times. You can measure that. Even you can check error logs. You can check the exception. And if any specific URL is consuming a time, you can open that URL, and even you can check in a detail that in that URL which class Magento is calling and which class is causing that problem. So that is really good, useful tool, New Relic. Second one is Blackfire. That is from the coding side. So this is from the server perspective, and if you wanted to even measure your code from the development system or in a local system or in a development environment, you can use the Blackfire. It will tell you that which function is calling how many times. So sometimes maybe you have written a code and that is like multiple times it calling and it's not required, then that can be easily identified through this Blackfire. It will help you for other few more information, like it will check for the number of URLs it is calling. Again, similar to New Relic, it will give some extra information also. And I hope maybe many of you are already know. How many of you know about this tool, Blackfire and New Relic? Good. Yep, that's going to be helpful.
Endpoints, we talked about middleware and how middleware can slow your whole site down. If you think about a site that's dependent on a third party, it's going to call out to that third party, and if it's not there or if it's slow, your whole front-end user experience is going to fail. So the more you can think about when you're architecting this, ways around those third-party endpoints and not being dependent on load times on your endpoints, and think about your shopping cart. I mean, how many people have had clients, or if you are a client, how many times have you thought, I want to check my inventory on every single category page, or I want to check my inventory in the cart, and I want to make sure that it's always there. If you're doing some real time in your cart, and especially in the B2B, if you have 1,000 things in your cart and you're going to look all those things up all the time, you are going to strain those endpoints. And I can say that we've had conversations with 3PLs that say our endpoints never go down, and we can take all the traffic you can send us until you get all the traffic that you've sent them, and they go down, which has happened. So in this website API endpoint model, we are going to find times when all of those could fail, and there's differences between the middleware part of it and the endpoint. So you have the endpoint, and you might also have something like Celegal or MuleSoft or iBoomi that also can be a failure point in there. So when you're architecting those performance parts to your sites, you need to think about those endpoints and how well they're going to respond.
And this middleware can be useful for you whenever you wanted to extend your application. Sometimes your actually Adobe Commerce or Magento is not going to help you, and you wanted to use the advanced other application. In that case, you can connect those other applications with Adobe Commerce or Magento software.
Middle point, I went through a lot of this. This is just kind of like what some of the areas that could be slow, the middleware systems. If you have an unnecessary use of multiple calls, so I gave the example of a category page, I would not recommend looking up every single inventory item on your category page, because especially if you're going to use layered navigation, there might be 1,000 things that load. Webhooks, using webhooks instead of REST or GraphQL can slow things down. And then just being busy, like if you have somebody that isn't used to all that traffic, I can say that we've had some clients where they're even in their payment gateway has been overwhelmed by traffic, especially around the Black Friday area. And then unavailable third-party endpoints is really killer.
So another thing which is causing in your core web vitals, that is a tracking pixel. So this is the most avoided things. Like lots of people are thinking to just improve the front end performance or the back end performance, but this is also causing a problem in your website to it slow down. So what exactly the tracking pixels is? For after your website will be loaded, if you wanted to have some advertise, or if you wanted to track the user's activity and on which button they are clicking, how many times they are scrolling, so all these things can be tracked, and that can be used for multiple purposes. But right now, to achieve that, you may require to add some snippet of the code, or you have to add the external JavaScript, and that is causing a problem sometimes. So make sure that you are using the correct one. I think me and Brent have one meeting like 2 days back, and one person says that their score was 95 plus, and once they install one of the tracking pixel extension, it went below 75. So make sure anytime if you are using a tracking pixel, verify the performance of your website. And as per one analysis, they said that if you are using, instead of custom tracking pixel, like manually generating the script and injecting the JS, instead of that, if you are using ready-made Google Tag Manager, then your performance can be 10% higher. Again, it is going to be reduced, but not as compared to the manual tracking.
And the previous one applies to, it doesn't matter if it's Magento, it could be WordPress. And the example we had was a WordPress client who wanted to make their site really fast. They added the Google tracking pixel, and suddenly it went from, like he said, 95 down to 75 by adding a Google pixel to a Google test page. So the big thing we're going to talk about is front end today, and front end is the main reason. Next slide is the main reason why your site is slow. 90% of your performance issues are going to happen on the front end. If you're caching right, very few of those performance issues are going to happen on the back end.
So what are the areas which you need to focus when you are checking the core web vitals? First one is accessibility. It means how easy customer can access your website, how they can find a buy now button, how they can click on the menu items. That is an important role it is playing for the core web vitals score. Second one is the performance. So your front end performance should be faster. So once customer enter the URL in the browser, at earliest they should see a content in their viewport area. And the third one is a SEO. SEO is now also playing the important role when they are giving you the score. So make sure that all these three things should be considered when you are developing your website. Now, Brent says the front end. So for front end, which are the areas may cause the problem? Few things we have earlier discussed, like a first contentful paint, largest content data. Apart from that, there are some JavaScript. For example, if you are loading a page, then if it is a blocker or dependent, that is called the render blocking resources. So that is causing a problem to not render your page. So you have to take care of that. These all are things you can find from the different tools which we have seen, like to measure the performance. Like a 3x response, sometimes you can see some URL which is not directly using your server, but it is coming from the different server, and that is slow, then it may ultimately slowing down your website. So these are some common areas which may causing the low performance.
Yeah, and just on the previous slide, like web page speed test is a good example of making sure that you're looking at your own site over and over again, and looking at those highlighted, that yellow and that red, are going to get highlighted for any type of slowdown. So red is going to show up for 404s. And 404s on your third party, then there's a silent 404s. You're not going to necessarily see them until you do that film strip of how your site is loading. You're going to see all these items displayed so you can get an idea what the problem is. All right, so common front-end issues. We have buttons that are going to be causing issues in accessibility. So accessibility, especially in the US, is a big thing. You want to make sure that your site is accessible to multiple people, to people who can't see. Just in general, some of those things are going to cause performance issues and SEO issues. So accessibilities, descriptive items on names, backgrounds, and foreground colors, heading elements. There's a lot of items that much larger than this list that you need to pay attention to and think about now, because just like the SEO is going to give us problems because of slowness, accessibility is going to be the same.
And all the things which you cannot directly check by the tools, so few things you require to do by manual QA, because all the tools is not going to give you all information. Second one is performance-wise. So we have discussed all the 3 points. So here, differ off-screen images. So for example, when you are loading the page and your image is trying to take more time, then it is going to impact the performance. So make sure that you have the image only for the viewport area. Rest of the images you can do the lazy load. You do not require to load all the image till the footer of your website, because anyhow user is not going to access the full website. Second thing is the properly sized images. So right now there are multiple devices like a mobile, tablet, desktop. So every device may have the different size of image required. So either you can have you can inbuilt, you can develop it by yourself, or right now there are multiple tools also available. They can auto resize the images and that will render as per from which devices you are visiting. Third one is rendering element render blocking resources. So if something you required in the viewport area and that is blocking the other JavaScript or the CSS which is you need for the footer, so make sure that you have the correct arrangement, that which URL or which things needs to be loaded first. Apart from that, there are few common things like minify JavaScript and serve the images in a next generation format. So right now WebP and AVIP are the two right now formats which are serving faster way as compared to the earlier one. And here you can use the CDN also. So instead of loading everything from your server, you can use the third party CDN. So all the media content will come from the different location and all the core or server related logic will come from your server.
All right, I won't spend a lot on this slide because we're running out of time, but we have a lot of common issues about SEO, which are going to be exposed through everything that we've talked about previously. So we won't dig into this one. We're going to kind of move on a little bit here. Go to the next slide. With Magento, I think we all know what the problem is. Why is your Magento site slow? And it's one word: Luma. Luma, most of the Magento sites are based on Blank or Luma, and Luma now is notoriously slow. Lots of CSS and JavaScript all loading at once. There's core structure issues. LCP is high on the out-of-the-box Luma theme. No offense against Igor here. A number of CSS. There's just so many things in Luma that now can be redone, and we are having an opportunity to redo those. Out-of-the-box Luma score. I would encourage anybody to load the demo version of Luma and see what it scores on Google Insights.
And ignore about that rewrite some of this Brent. He has already rewrite this one. So our notes are on slide. Apart from, so Brent says that Luma is the problem, then what can be the different solutions which you can use for your website? So first one is a headless. So everyone know, but just I'm given the higher level architecture that how it may work. So in the headless, your front end can be anything in any different languages. You can even have your mobile apps, or maybe you can have the different view layers. All these needs to be communicate with your backend server, or if you are using any middleware or any integrations for that through the API. So API can be a middle layer between your backend system and the front end system. And this API can be a REST API or a GraphQL API. So right now, emerging one is a GraphQL. If you can use that one, then it can give you the better performance. And there are some tools available, or like ready-made things available, which you can use for your headless. One is a Magento PWA Studio. You can use that one. Second one is you can use a Vue storefront. Third one is a Scandi PWA you can use, or you can cook your own. So you can make your own front end, and that will also work.
Yeah, if anybody knows Rietzma, he's done his own front end. He said he built it in like 27 minutes or something, but he's super smart. So I'm joking, he took a little longer than that. So everybody's been waiting for the Hoofa theme. You know, the Hoofa theme, and now there's also a Breeze theme. Redoing the whole front end is what is necessary to keep the monolith in Magento. The Hoofa theme, which they're out here today, uses Tailwind and Alpine to reinvent the way the front end performs. And it does truly perform fantastically. Next slide. So the advantages, we'll just talk about it. Besides it makes it faster, there's a community support around it right now. And I would encourage you to go talk to them at their booth. There's already a lot of third parties doing extensions for Hoofa. There's middleware pieces that I've seen that are coming out to help you do that. And just getting developers up to speed on doing development on top of it is making it a lot easier. All right.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to blow through the second part of that, but I know we wanted, if there's any questions, we have some time, I think, for questions.
So you mentioned that GraphQL is very fast. Is there any competitors according to you, or do you think GraphQL is the fastest protocol out there?
So right now, like in a Magento, you can, if you are just going with Magento or Adobe Commerce, then they have REST or GraphQL available. But I'm not sure, maybe Igor, you know any other, I don't know, but any other API apart from REST and GraphQL? Nope. So I think GraphQL is right now the faster one.
Actually, bad phrasing of question on my side. Is there any way that you can misuse GraphQL into getting bad performance?
That's depend on the code quality. So if somewhere in a GraphQL API call, someone has just repeated loop, or they're trying to load things again and again in the same function, then it may cause a problem. Otherwise, it should be faster.
Can I add something to it? We do have a client that is using MuleSoft, and MuleSoft has a limit on the API requests. Magento is handling the requests faster than MuleSoft. MuleSoft cannot keep up with it and is all the time behind. So some of the times the software doesn't have the ability to respond to the limits of the request that we can send from Magento to MuleSoft or vice versa. So that's my experience.
Yeah, and the queuing service is another way to get around some of that. Like RabbitMQ is a way that you can get around having. If it's not real time, you can queue up those transactions so they can be sent in when things are available.
Sorry to be all the way back here. So the first input delay that you mentioned, first input delay that you mentioned earlier on in the slides, that is a metric I don't recall ever having worked with before. And you mentioned that under 100 milliseconds is what it needs to be. From what point in the render of the page is that measured?
You are referring the first one, right?
Yeah, if you go back a few more.
The FID.
That one. Yep.
Oops.
You went.
Next one. Keep
Went
going.
a little too far. But anyway, it was the
Okay, yeah.
the green and red
So
scale.
I think the layout shift, they are saying like 0.1 second.
Mhm.
So that should be not more than that. Otherwise, user will able to see the layout shift is happening. So this, like your question is like from where this number came?
No, it's not. No, the question isn't about CLS. It's about the third metric that was on the slide, first input delay, and you mentioned that it should really be under 100 milliseconds to indicate that it's performing properly. I'm just wondering, what is that 100 or so milliseconds measured from? What point in the render cycle of the page?
So that is once it is rendered. Like for example, once content will be rendered in your input viewport, then after there should be not delay when you click on something or when you are doing the user activity. At that time, it should be less than 100 milliseconds.
Yeah, so
Okay.
like when somebody clicks on the button, it should be usable. That button should be usable within 100 milliseconds.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Over. Okay.
I have a question about headless. I have two questions. One of them is that do you think that future of Magento is only headless, or do you think it's going to be two ways? And the second question is, for the headless themes that you mentioned, there are 3 of them, which one would you recommend the best? And if not, maybe with the size of the companies, what do you think about them?
Yeah, so first, I think that monolith is going to be around, especially if we see some of what the community is doing. So I think you're going to have a choice. There's always going to be something that people want built in. So some of the competitors who have always been headless are now bundling a front end. So I think the monolith and headless are going to sit side by side, and they can coexist side by side. Monolith is a lot easier for a lot of people. I think the other ones, I don't have a recommendation on any particular PWA front end. Of course, we're going to say PWA Studio is what you should go with because we're here with Adobe.
I can give. So in that case, you can consider the budget, like because in every platform there is a different timeline required and budget. So it's depend on the end client's budget, and that way you can recommend either go with PWA Studio, because in PWA Studio you can get lots of things ready-made as compared to building everything in the different platforms. So that may also. Yeah. There is one question from him. Last one. Please.
This is a question about Blackfire, the tool that you mentioned. Does the dashboard show changes over time? Because I know Google Search Console, it can take weeks if you make a change because of how it calculates it. Or does it only show like the current Google Search Console scores?
So Blackfire, maybe I'm not able to understand your question exactly. You mean like once you deploy the new code, then?
No, I mean, if you make some changes, like say you go to Google Search Console, you see some issues that you had to resolve. I've worked with Google Search Console before, and they can take like a month to push over some of the metrics. Does Blackfire have in the dashboard a way to see changes, like your score over time change, or is it just how it is currently?
It is going to be currently.
Okay.
So it may be not the last 1 year or last 1 week data. But for right now, earlier they have just for the code checking, but now they have the server performance also. So they are providing little bit in, features which New Relic have. Okay. So in those things you can easily find with the date range. But if you wanted to check, let's say, one file and how many times this function is getting called, then that can be an immediate one only. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, think of Blackfire as backwards facing towards the server, and then some of the other tools we thought about forward facing for front end things. Some of them intermix, like you can use them both, but.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.